flourishing around the world. United States came up with a major package of Inflation Reduction Act. Europe is giving a similar response to that. Japan, India, China.
Countries which really want to pump prime their economy, which really want to increase the energy balance, the only way which will actually bring the cost of energy down, and that is through the supply of green energy, which is the only energy, the more you use it, the cheaper it becomes. They are the economies which are going to steal the march on the rest of the world.
In the $3.4 trillion investment gap to finance the climate challenge, I think we have more than $100 billion that is needed to fund the infrastructure gap just in Africa. It's very important for everyone to ensure that we are financing projects in an inclusive way without excluding any technology, any fuel that is important for the future.
If you want to decarbonize a complete value chain, it's very hard for one player in the industry to do that alone. So what we do in LCET, low carbon emitting technologies, in this platform, which has been created by the WEF, what we do here is, with a group of industry players, we collectively decarbonize an entire value chain, and this spreads risk.
We need to understand that energy is not only about supply. Many people talk about fossil fuel versus renewable. That is an important part of the debate. But we have to talk also a lot about, or to work a lot, on the demand side. Because if we lower the demand, we'll need less energy supply.
So it's about making sure that we actually make a reality out of the technology, the knowledge and the capital that is actually there in order to run this. And we need to increase the pace now.
Our world has never ever witnessed an energy crisis of this depth and of this complexity.
Energy is the lifeblood of economy. We remember the importance of energy when we have a scarcity of it. An energy crisis is an opportunity to do a step change. There is no time to lose, and so we should really use this opportunity to go ahead and decarbonize the energy system and also make energy system more resilient, secure and affordable for everyone.
Industrial production and transportation are the two sectors that emit most CO2 in Europe. Electrification of industrial processes is often the solution. And we already see a lot of examples of that, especially in industry, I think.
If you look specifically at the hard-to-abate sectors, what you see is that the solutions technically are there. What is stopping the transition is actually the cost of doing it.
Manufacturing.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Please, I need you to confirm in the chat that you can hear me. Maybe you just type that you can hear me, or you just give me a reaction to confirm that you can hear me. Please, can anyone hear me? Oh, great. Thank you very much, Kazim. Thank you. Sound is clear. Fantastic. Yes. Everyone can confirm that they can hear me. That's great. So yeah, sustainable greetings to every one of you in your respective location. And I'm on behalf of the Sustainable Energy Accelerator program, team members and HADEP Africa as a whole, you are all welcome to today's workshop. Of course, I see that we are very intentional about this program. I see a number of us, who joined the section even at about 10 minutes before the section, which is actually a great attribute and attitude of leaders. Of course, we commend you for that. You can see Lorige from Cameroon. I can see Anur from Chad. I see Abubakar from Guinea. I see Caroline from Kenya. Of course, I can see Jean-Claude from Madagascar. I see Justicia from Namibia. I can see Leonard from Nigeria. And of course, I see Rashid from Ghana. I see Simon Cesar from Sierra Leone. I see Mainda from Tanzania. Yes, yes, yes. I see Leganji from Zambia. And of course, time will not permit me to mention the names of each and every one of you on this call this morning. But I really want you to be, assured that we see you all. And of course, we appreciate your commitment to your growth through our Sustainable Energy Accelerator program. And without a doubt, I believe that last week's session was a great and insightful one. And of course, we are here again to learn. And definitely, we are sure that we are really going to be having a much better section today. And yes, for some of us, that it appears as though maybe you're joining us for the first time, although I really do not want to believe that there is anyone on this call that is joining us for the first time. However, by your identification on the program, and by that I mean the way you are named, it makes some of you seem as though you are new to the program, or maybe this is the first time that you're joining us. So please, I want to enjoin those of you that are not properly renamed to please do well to rename yourself appropriately. Of course, I like to believe that about this time with us on this program, we are not supposed to be talking about how to properly rename yourself again on the program. However, if you would not want to be kicked to the waiting room, I want you to do the needful now before we proceed into today's topic. And yes, like always, we have another industry expert with us on this section today, a seasoned professional who, of course, is going to take us on a learning journey this morning. But before we proceed to today's topic, we would like to hear from us, maybe some 3 participants to speak on what they learned or their take home from the last section. But just for a refresher, before we even go into the, maybe asking about our take homes and, a kind of what we learned. Do we even remember what last session's topic was again? Can I say in the chat what the last section's topic was? Is anyone typing? I want to see whether we are duly following this section or not. I'd like to see in the chat, what was the topic for last section? Let's see whether we are really following up. Oh, Sharon from Kenya. Sharon is a distinction student. Yes, everyone give it to Sharon. That's a clap from each and every one of us for Sharon. And of course, I like to believe that every other person too is like Sharon. So if you would like to share your take home from the last second, yeah, Leonard from Nigeria. Yes. The last topic was the future of sustainable energy. That's fantastic. So if you would like to share your take home from the last section with us, I would want you to signify, by using the raise hand function, and we'll grant you the permission to unmute and share your thoughts with us. So anyone who likes to share their take home from the last section can do all now to use the raise hand function, and would give you the opportunity to share your thought with us. So any volunteer? Do we have any volunteer that likes to share their take home from the last section? And of course, maybe I should mention this. If we do not have at least 3 take homes and lessons from the last section, we may not proceed to today's class, because having nothing to reference as our learning points from the last section would indicate that it's either that we are not learning enough, or maybe, there is not any reason for us to, continue with this section, which I doubt is the case. Or if you do not want to speak, maybe you don't want to speak, if you would like to use the chat to share your thought with us, yes, you can also do well to use the chat, and we will catch it from here. We would see it. We would see it from here and we would catch it. So whichever is your choice, at least I want to see about 3 or 5 lessons from the previous section before we proceed into today's topic. So is anyone volunteering? Is anyone typing? Which one? Okay, Olalu Akitan says the future is bright. Okay, what Olalu Akitan learned from the last session was that the future is bright for solar and e-mobility. Okay, great. That's a good one, Olalu Akitan. Yes. Yeah, I see another one from Sharon. Sharon is saying one of the trends in sustainable energy is the increase in the amount of investment of clean energy. Why? The need to improve energy accessibility across the globe and transitioning from dirty energy to clean energy. Fantastic. So right about now, we are sure that we're learning. Yes, Ololu Akitan is dropping another one. It's like Ololua is the ambassador for C on this program. He says, always think energy security as a geopolitical war. Correct. I remembered quite well that the speaker mentioned that a number of times. Yes. Kazim is saying one of my take home was that our global economy would depend on our access to power that will be made possible through sustainable energy. Great. And Lasso from Uganda is saying solar is the day-to-day need worldwide. Oh, great. And yeah, Margaret says that take home was that investment in clean energy has increased by 40% since 2020. So we are on the right track with the coming. Oh, okay, great. Yes, Mary from Kenya is saying there's a global shift to sustainability and the sector is really growing. Fantastic. So I think this is enough for us to be able to proceed into today's section. This is already an evidence that we are learning and we are not just a part of the section, and not having anything to catch. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I see your comments, Leonard. Thank you very much. So we sincerely appreciate your feedback and responses. And right about now, we would like to invite our guest speaker today, who is already on the call with us for our presentation. And just before I will hand over to her, I would like to read out a professional bio to each and every one of us so that we are well prepared to receive another fantastic lesson from our speaker this morning. So our speaker for this morning is Madam Chinenye Ajayi. Of course, she may not be new to some of you or even to all of you. You must have met Madam Chinenye before at the opening ceremony. And, Madam Chinenye is an energy professional, a versatile commercial lawyer with over a decade experience, and she's currently a managing associate and team lead power and infrastructure practice at Olaniwun Ajayi LP, where she provides legal and business advisory services to clients within the energy sector, particularly in the renewable energy space. She is an entrepreneur who is passionate about energy transition and the achievement of the SDG 7. This includes education, training, mentorship, and economic empowerment towards promoting affordable energy access and energy security. Amongst other volunteer activities within the energy sector, Madam Chinenye serves as a coordinator of the African Fellowship of Young Energy Leaders, AFYEL, an education venture designed to invest into the next generation of energy leaders who will deliver a sustainable access to energy and ultimately a zero carbon Africa. It is with great honor and pleasure that I welcome Madam Chinenye this morning. And I'm sure that each and every one of you on this call, you will be willing to welcome her with your reactions and your messages in the chat. Otherwise, your disposition to welcoming her will determine the energy for this section this morning. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want us now to welcome Madam Chinenye. Madam Chinenye, if you can just open your camera and say hello to our participants this morning.
I just realized I was muted. Okay, everyone. I hope you can hear me and you can see me.
Yes. We can hear you and we see you. You see you. You're looking very beautiful, madam.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
All right. So yes, you're welcome, and we really appreciate your time for making it possible to be with us this morning. And you have the floor for the next for the 5 minutes, Ma. And after your presentation, we'll be taking questions from the audience. Of course, it's always an interactive class, an engaging class that you would really enjoy. These are vibrant energy leaders on the call that really are thirsty for knowledge and learning. So I'm sure that we are really going to be having a great time with you. So you can go on to sharing your presentation now, and I'll be on this end of the room with you, madam.
All right, thank you very much. Just a second to share my screen. Please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen if you would just put it on presentation mode.
How about now?
Fantastic.
Okay. Good morning again, everyone from different parts of Africa. It's my pleasure to meet you all. I might not be able to mention all the names and the different countries, but thank you so much for taking out time to be part of this program. The fact that you've taken out time to develop yourself in terms of your knowledge and skill is worth commending. And I will say again, it's a good one. Well done. And thank you so much to the IDEF team as well for having me. So this morning, so we just get right into it. So we'll be talking about energy law and regulation. When I saw the topic, I was just wondering like where to start. Law is not something that is general across board. We have different legal regimes when it comes to energy from different countries. And I see that we have participants from different countries. So what I've done is to select a few countries, right? But while discussing all of this, I'll try to emphasize on the key principles you should look out for, the key things to look out for, depending on your jurisdiction or whatever country that you come from. So the principles of law are generally always the same, but every country then decides to take it at different forms or different patterns or different structures, but the principles are essentially the same. Okay, so again, energy law and regulation, and just in terms of outline, what we'll be doing is that we'll look at we'll just have an introduction, then we'll look at the legal regime for energy, particularly when it focuses on electricity aspects of things in Nigeria, in Ghana, in South Africa, in Kenya. And then we then also look at key project documents. Again, because when you talk about law generally or legal aspect of it, one of the key things you need to look out for beyond the law in terms of statutes that the government passes, there is also the place of contractual document, which I really feel is very relevant to you. So I'll talk about that very broadly, and then we can then get into the questions and answers. So just by way of introduction, when it comes to law and regulation generally, it's very important because they are the foundation for any form of economic development you can think about. So think about all of the great things you've seen in Nigeria or any other country you can think of. One of the things where it all begins starts with a policy, it starts with a law. So the essence of this is that law is binding, in that once a law is passed, it is expected that everyone complies with it. And laws as well creates like some form of certainty. So when you have a law that speaks to about a particular thing, it gives everyone clarity as to what that thing is, how it's meant to operate, what's the penalty for not operating in accordance with the provision of the law, and the benefits, if any, when you comply. So laws are very important, and that is why it usually takes a rigorous process, depending on how it's structured in your respective countries. But for instance, in Nigeria, to pass a single law can take a very long time, and various procedures from first reading, second reading, then the National Assembly, if it goes first to the House of Reps, then it goes to the Senate before it gets to the president. So it's a long process, and that's because a lot of thinking has to go into laws. And I don't know, for some of us on the call, you may also decide to go into the energy law aspect. It's also something to think about. So what I'm just trying to get at with introduction is to let you know that law is very significant when it comes to stimulating energy development and promoting sustainable energy access. So the first place to always start is the law. Okay, and then I'll just talk about a couple of things that the law has actually promoted in recent times. So we see that for any incentive or subsidy to apply in any country, one of the first instruments for initiating that is a law. Okay, so you need to have a law that supports an incentive. If not, it is just a mere policy, and you cannot mandate any government official or anyone to accord you that incentive or grant you that subsidy, except it is backed by law. So it means that depending on your position in your country, if you're trying to promote any form of development or any new initiative in your sector, in the energy sector, a good place to always start will always be to ensure that there is a law, a legal framework that backs that incentive or subsidies. Same with applicable renewable portfolio standard. This is very important as we look at promoting sustainable energy. One of the things we need to consider is renewable portfolio standard. What this essentially means is that it's a mandatory obligation, typically by the government or the regulator, mandating certain companies or institutions to use renewable energy, certain percentage of renewable energy in their energy mix. And this is very important because the more of these kind of laws we have, it means there will be more demand for renewable energy. And of course, with more demand means there are more businesses, more projects to be done. So net metering, grid connection, these are various aspects of the energy space that law regulates. So you have law, for you to have net metering, there has to be a law that backs it up. For grid connection and access, there has to be a law that backs it up. Environmental health regulation, carbon pricing, research and development, permitting talks about it, streamlined permits talks about licensing and approvals, energy storage, international companies. These are various aspects, things that come up within the energy space. And for each of these ones, there are laws that back them up. So the key point to take away from introduction here is that whatever initiative, development you're looking to champion as a member of this program, or whatever it is you're looking to do within your sector, the first place to start off with is to look at the law that is applicable in that regard. And if there is none, a good place to start would be to initiate the process of passing a law that covers that area, so that there's the good back. And one very important thing is that if it's just a mere policy, if it's just a mere policy, anyone can change it after tomorrow, just at their whim and caprice. But when you have a law, what happens is that it is binding, and a new government, a new system can't just, change it. So just move on quickly. So we'll just look at Nigeria. So what do we have in Nigeria? So I see that we have a couple of Nigerians on the call. And in terms of the legal framework within Nigeria, a key thing to consider, a few statutes look at is the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. For as many of us are following the trend previously, when it comes to legislation or making laws now, with respect to electricity, was limited only to the federal government. But thankfully now, we now have a much more decentralized energy system, such that the state governments can now make laws with respect to energy, with respect to their electricity markets. So this means for those of us on the call who are Nigerians, or even if you're not a Nigerian, you can do business in Nigeria, right? So it means there are a lot of opportunities now to undertake energy projects at the various levels, both at the state government level and at the federal government level. So that's one of the recent and most notable development within the energy space, electricity energy space in Nigeria. Then we also have the EIA. Well, EIA is, I believe every country has an EIA. So again, for those of us that whose country might not be discussed, always look at the constitution. What does law provide with respect to the powers with respect to energy generally? So EIA Act is the act that mandates environmental impact assessment to be conducted whenever an energy project is being undertaken. And it's mandatory to comply with the provisions of this law. If not, you'll be operating against the law. So for everyone, whatever project you're looking to do, it's important to check. Now, it is not every project that an EIA may be required for. EIA is typically required for large projects. So what I would say is check your respective environmental laws. It might not be called an EIA in your country. Whatever it is called, it's important to check it and ensure that whatever it is you're trying to do complies with the provision of that law. Okay, so we also have the Electricity Act, which is the key statute that regulates the electricity and energy overall in Nigeria. And for the first time, we have it was passed in 2023 last year, and for the first time we have renewable energy incorporated into the act. Prior to now, we never really had any statute that speaks to renewable energy, but for the first time we have that provision that not just the fact that it recognizes it also makes certain provides for certain incentives, as we will see. For instance, is the it provides that at some point there'll be feed-in tariffs, which is a special kind of tariff for renewable energy projects. And then it also provides for that the regulator can mandate distribution companies to incorporate a certain level of renewable energy into their energy mix, which is already in practice now. If you follow trends in Nigeria, a lot of discos are looking out for renewable energy producers to produce energy that they can, incorporate into their mix to meet up with the statutory requirements. Okay, so we also have state level policies at different state governments levels. So again, just to speak about this, I'll just brush through this very quickly. If you're looking to set up a business in Nigeria, okay, and I'll just speak through this across different countries. Now, I believe all of us have a lot of ideas that we're looking to birth or to bring to life with the knowledge you gain from this program. So one of the key things you need to get into after you must have, you have all your ideas all set out, is to establish a company. What I've done on this slide here is essentially just talk about how to register a company in Nigeria, which I believe most of us are very familiar with. If you're Nigerian, maybe. But for every other person, look at look what's respective law within your country and what are the requirements for setting up a business in that country, and ensure that you comply with that. Because we've had scenarios where people had very nice ideas, they just went about doing it with a name that they felt they liked, they never registered. In fact, I have a friend that decided to do that for over 2 years. He was using a name that he never registered. And just when he was about to register, or he got around registering the name with the Corporate Affairs Commission, he discovered that someone else was already using the name. And all of the brand he has built around that name was all gone. He was then compelled to start afresh and register a new name and begin to go about with brand awareness. So I'm sure you don't want to be in that place. So I will encourage everyone of whatever idea you are initiating at this point, register a company in accordance with the provision of the law in your country. And so that you are properly, your brand or whatever it is you're doing is properly recognized by the law. That's an important thing to mention for Nigeria. If you're looking to set up a company with foreign partners, okay, and one of the key requirements is that your share capital has to be about 100 million naira. Now, when I saw that, I was wondering why. It's not in line with ease of doing business, like we champion, but then again, it is the law. Like I told us, once it's the law, is the law. So that is that requirement. But aside from that, you can always find out, you can get a legal person to assist you with setting up a company in Nigeria. So okay, this still has to do with the process. You register a company, reserve a name, complete all the forms, pay your fees, and then you get your company registered. So I would like to dwell on this one a little bit more, and that's because that's some of the incentives that we have within the energy space for companies within the renewable energy sector. Now, I wanted to, for every one of you, this is something to look out for. Given the recent trends on development of renewable energy, a lot of countries have been coming up with incentives of different forms to drive demand, to drive the growth of the sector. So you must keep your eyes open in this regard, right? I recall that in China, for instance, I think it was last year, China was regarded as one of the countries that received the highest level of investments in the renewable energy space. And why was that? That was because they just made a law that provided for an incentive. I think it was a tax credit or something. I can't recall the specific kind of incentive now. But because of that singular incentive, there was a massive drive for renewable energy. So this just tell us the importance of legally backed incentives and how they can drive development and how they can even make your business profitable. Because if these incentives are available and you don't take advantage of them, then they are not of any use to you. So it's important in your respective countries, make inquiries, do your research. What are the incentives that are available to me as a player in the sustainable energy sector? And how can I take advantage of these benefits to improve what I do? Right. So for instance, in Nigeria, we have custom duty exemptions for renewable energy equipment imported into the country. Well, although there have been some changes around this for some time, but yeah, it exists at some point. Then there's also a tax holiday on dividend income. And that means there's any dividend that is generated from renewable energy business, you can obtain a tax holiday. There's also a pioneer status incentive. And this one means it provides that if you're a company within the renewable energy space for the first 5 years, you're exempted from tax. So that's a good one. It means you can maximize profits. Then there are other incentives that have been contemplated under the Electricity Act. So that you provide things like feed-in tariffs, right? Meaning a special kind of guaranteed tariff for renewable energy sector. Then there's also other incentives. They may not come in the form of monetary incentives. It may just be probably ease of application. For instance, if you're going to do a mini grid in Nigeria, the requirement for a mini grid is less cumbersome compared to if you're doing a proper power project. So these are some of the things that we can see. So there are a couple of other financial institutions also that provide soft loans at reduced interest rates for renewable energy companies. So, or not just renewable energy, but any other sustainable energy related projects or businesses. So you need to keep your eyes. For instance, I think in Nigeria, we have Bank of Industry. I'm aware they provide some form of concessional funding with reduced interest rate for renewable energy. So please pay attention to that. Look at your country. What are the different laws? What are the incentives that have been provided? And see how you can take benefit of this for your various ideas and projects. So a key thing to also consider is licensing, right? So it's important that you understand the licensing requirement, because no matter how lofty your ideas are, if you don't comply with the licensing or licensing or approval regime within your respective country, you'll be conducting an illegal business. Okay, so it's always important to check what are the laws, what are the requirements I need to. And again, interestingly, the different laws provide for different categories of licensing. So for instance, in Nigeria, we have generation license, and even at that, there are different thresholds. If you're generating any electricity below 1 megawatt for yourself, meaning for self-use or for the use of the entity generating the electricity, then you do not need any form of approval for your generation, right? And if you're generating above 1 megawatt, still for self-use, then you need a captive permit. Okay, and then if you tend to distribute that power, and you're distributing above 100 kilowatts, I think, yes, you need to get a distribution license. So very recently, the market has now also opened for transmission licenses. So it means that you need to pay attention to the requirements for your respective, what kind of business are you looking to do? What kind of idea are you looking to set up? And then ensure that you get the necessary licenses. And even if you're looking to trading means I'm buying in bulk from a generator and I'm selling to a consumer, more like a middleman trading electricity. You also need a trading license in Nigeria. If you're looking to set up a mini grid being, a small system that generates and also distributes, that is less than 1 megawatt. You also need a mini grid permit. Okay, and this is very important for mini grids, because if you do not obtain the necessary permit or approval, you might probably lose your investment when a proper distribution company moves into that premises. So if you are registered and get if you get your permits under the mini grid regime, whenever a distribution company comes to the site where your mini grid is located, you are entitled to be compensated adequately. That is, if they need you to decommission, or they can integrate with yours. But when you don't have necessary approval, you're running at a risk, and you stand the chance of losing your investment. So it is very important. Always, always, always look out for the licensing. Don't assume. I always say it's better to check and then confirm, okay, this is not applicable to me, than assume that it's not necessary, it doesn't matter, no one will get me. It's always good to comply with the legal requirements. And just to also add that a very important reason for complying is that it makes you a lot more investor ready or investment ready. Because one of the things that lenders or financiers will look out for when they're evaluating your project or your business is, to what extent have you complied with the provision of the law? In setting up, in getting the licenses, in getting the approval, to what extent have you complied? And if you haven't complied, then it means that you have a problem. They see that you are not complying. It means that there's a possibility of you paying penalties. So it just is very unattractive to lenders. And in that scenario, you might lose an opportunity to get funds. The second reason I would add again is that where you fail to comply with all of the licenses or approvals, and one of the things you also pay attention is some of these requirements are even yearly. For instance, you're meant to pay your tax on a yearly basis. You're meant to make certain payments on a yearly basis, or maybe your licensing fees on a yearly basis. Whatever it is, endeavor to comply. So that, because the thing is, if you fail to comply, at the point perhaps you're trying to raise some funding or make some applications, and then these things are required, you begin to scout all over for them. And at that point, they become extremely expensive to procure, because you will not just be paying the cost of getting those licenses, you're going to be paying for penalties for not complying the many years before. So it's always in the interest of you as a business owner, as a sustainable energy developer, to ensure that you get your necessary approval. I know it might not be easy, because I also, like I told you, I'm also an entrepreneur, because as starting out initially, you may feel like, oh, it's a lot of money, I don't have that resources right now, and you'll be tempted to just, ignore it, because really nobody might disturb you at the initial stages. But if you have the long-term view of growing and growing big as a business, you need to pay attention to your licenses and ensure that you get them as much as they apply to you so that you are ready whenever an opportunity comes. You don't prepare for opportunities on the day the opportunity arrives. You prepare way long before, okay? Especially when you see yourself as a business that is growing, it's going to be both national and international, right? So just an important point to bear in mind across your various countries. So I'll for the other countries, I will just run through them because of our time. But again, for instance, in Ghana, you also have the division of the electricity sector into generation, transmission, and distribution. There's an energy policy, and a good percentage of the electricity generated in Ghana is both from thermal and hydro. But then again, the principles are the same. Look at the relevant laws. So we have a couple of laws in Ghana that regulate electricity. You have the Energy Commission Act. You have the Volta River Development Act. You have the Renewable Energy Act as well. You have the National Electricity Grid. So these are different relevant laws. I might not be able to dive into their details as they may differ. But what I just need you to understand is ensure that you're familiar with the laws. And don't be tempted to think like, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't need to know these things. If you're going to play in a particular sector, at the very least, you need to have the very basic knowledge of the key things that are required in that sector. You need to know what the laws are. You need to know what the licensing regimes are. You need to know what the approvals are. Okay, so for those of us in Ghana, coming from Ghana, make sure you look at these laws and find out what are the things that are applicable. And if you can't look at them, you may very well engage a lawyer within Ghana that's familiar with this, an energy lawyer that's familiar with this regime so that they can assist you with knowing the exact licensing requirements you need and the process you need to also set up. And also, like we said, to know the incentives that you need. Okay, I think I'll just run through this quickly. So in distribution, we also have different arms of distribution. And just to also mention that, when it comes to the energy space, most countries have the three main aspects of the value chain, which is generation, transmission, and distribution. So you might need to then make a choice. What aspect of the value chain do I want to play? And depending on the size of project that you are doing, do I want it to be grid connected, or do I just want to operate as an off-grid business? So whether you operate off-grid, meaning you're not connected to the national grid. So it means that you need to make that decision, you need to make that choice. And that will determine the kind of approval that you will get. That will determine the kind of regulations you need to comply with. Well, it is much more regulated when you are connected to the central grid. Okay, off-grids are usually a lot more flexible because most of your engagement or most of your interactions will be with your off-taker in that instance. But if you're grid connected, you need to ensure that you comply with things like your grid code. Your grid code is like the rules and regulation of how the grid operates. You need to comply with your distribution code, whatever aspect of the value chain you want to play in. And again, even if you're looking to operate off-grid, it means that you also need to find out what are the components, because if I'm a renewable energy generator and I need to operate off-grid, I then need to begin to ask myself, how do I get the power from my location to my customer, except your customer is within close range or rather still at the same site where the plant is being set up. So a number of considerations, but what I would say is have clarity as to the aspects of the energy sector you want to play. If it is EVs, for instance, if it is charging stations, I'm just trying to think about all the various aspects that IDEF covers. I know you cover both EVs, you cover both renewable energy, any form of sustainable energy development area you want to play in. Key thing to know is what are the laws regulating that areas again, and what are the things I need to comply with. Usually, you find much more regulation around electricity aspects, so renewable energy, whether it is wind or solar or geothermal, as you would see, those are the areas that regulate. But the aspect of things like clean cooking, well, there might be some regulation, or what's this? There might be some regulation, but it might not be as cumbersome or as detailed as you would see for renewable energy generation. Okay, so I will then move on to So, okay, now this, for instance, this is Ghana, and these are the different activities that require licensing in Ghana. So if, for instance, if you want to get into wholesale supply of thermal or hydroelectricity, you need to get a license. If you want to get into electricity brokerage, which is more like buying and selling, you need to get a license. And when you're going into electricity transmission, you need to get a license, distribution, sale, embedded. I'm sure we understand what embedded means. Embedded essentially means you're generating electricity and passing it through an existing distribution network. And I suppose probably connected to the grid. Then it's also important to know that there may be exemptions, right? So like I gave us an instance for Nigeria. If you're producing an electricity below 1 megawatt, you don't need any form of approval from the regulator. So it's also good to look at exemptions so that you find out if you fall within an exemption. And where you do, then you enjoy it, right? And then even if you fall within an exemption, you also need to track your progress so that you know, because as you grow as a business, you might then exceed the exemption threshold, meaning that you then need to go back and get approval. So it's important to bear that in mind as well. And it's also important to know all of these things because it helps you structure your projects. So let me give an instance. I was working on a project at some point, and the client didn't want to go through the rigor of getting a license, right? So one of the things, my team and I had to do was to say, okay, if you don't want to go to the rigors of getting a license at these initial stages, one of the things you can do is to ensure that whatever power plant you're constructing or solar plant you're constructing does not exceed 1 megawatt. So with the knowledge of the law and exemption, you'll be able to structure your project in a way that gives you some form of convenience. But when you're not aware, you can might as well go and build a plant of 5 or 10 megawatts, and of course you are caught. But what we then did was to have different, so rather than having 10 megawatts plant in a place, we had like 900 here, 800 there, at different locations, at different places. And that's kind of for the meantime, took away the necessity for an approval. But of course, as the business kept growing, you had to then get license. So it's important to know all of these things so that you know what aspects how you can structure your business much more efficiently. Okay, all right, I think we've talked about this. South Africa, well, I guess it's it's very central scheme here. So South Africa is mostly dominated by a state-owned utility, Eskom, like we know. I don't know if our South Africans on the call, but yeah, we have that, and Eskom essentially controls the sector, controls transmission. Distribution is split between Eskom and a couple of other municipalities, and even though the market is not decentralized, right, but there is some aspect of IPPs, meaning that the IPPs meaning independent power producers. So you can set up a power plant, a renewable energy plant, and that can supply electricity to the grid. But of course, you have to comply with the necessary processes, with Eskom and with the regulator. Yeah, I think the regulator here is called NESA. That's the National Electricity Regulator South Africa. I hope I got that correctly. But what I'm just still on the same point is also find out electricity tariff. I just want to speak to that point. Electricity tariff. It's important to ensure you look out for the electricity tariff regime within your country. Okay, so because the moment, for instance, in Nigeria, if you are a licensed, if you're a licensee of NEC, then you must necessarily comply with the tariff matrix provided by NEC. You can't just charge anything randomly. Okay, but there are certain categories of power developers that have the liberty to choose or decide what their tariff is. Again, which is why the knowledge of the law is important, or at the very least, you have someone who understands the legal framework on your team. And why this is important is that you're able to know how to structure your business. For instance, if I know that I want a regime that gives me flexibility in setting my tariff, then I need to know those aspects of the sector that I can play in that has little regulation on tariff. I don't know if I'm hoping that you're getting the logic. But it's important to note that you need to have this understanding so you know how to play. It's like seeing a lot of, how do I put it? It's more like will I put it a chess game? Whatever game you're good at playing, you have to strategize. I know and look for the least expensive. What's the spot on the screen? I look for the least expensive and the least the least stressful way of undertaking your business, at least at the initial stages. Excuse me. So this is why you need to understand the legal regime in your country. Okay, so for ESCOM here, if you are doing an IPP, you can need to go through ESCOM. But apart from that, it's really a very highly regulated. What's this on my screen? Just a second, I'm trying to pull this out. I'll just stop sharing and reshare again.
And yes, please, whoever it is that is marking the presentation, please do well to avoid that, please. Please. And I think maybe, well, after now, maybe I'll call the person's name, but that person should please be careful.
All right, thank you for that. Let me just stop. Try to share again. See. Okay. Please confirm that you can see my screen now.
Yes, we have a nice presentation there now.
Okay, so a couple of laws to look out for in South Africa. You have the National Energy Regulator Act, you have the Electricity Regulation Act, and the National Energy Act. So it's important to know. I think I recall that there's some couple of amendments that's been proposed within South Africa to unbundle ESCOM into a much more competitive entity, that way you have generation different from distribution and transmission. That would be a great one, as it will help attract investment and other private sector participants within the space. But then again, key take home here is ensure that you look at the relevant laws within your state, and just in case your business idea is not connected to renewable energy, please pay attention to the laws that apply. Don't assume there is none. Make sure that you make that inquiry and ensure that you comply. So move on quickly. So what are some of the key permits? Now, it's important to note that apart from the licenses that you get from your key regulator, say, assuming you're doing a renewable energy project from probably your NEC for Nigeria or NESA for South Africa, there may be other agencies that you might need to get approval for. So the example is, for instance, the EIA for environmental assessment. There could be others like biodiversity permit, like this South Africa, for instance. There are other permits that you may need to get, things like atmospheric emission licenses, depending on the nature of what you're doing, water use licenses, biodiversity permit, zoning consent, building plans. These are things that you may need to get depending on the nature of project that you're undertaking. Okay, so it's not just enough to get a license from your key regulator and that's over. You must also get other approvals that may be required within your sector that may not necessarily be related to the energy sector, but they are connected. They are connected sectors, or they are connected activities that relate to your business. I'll move on quickly. It's just to distribution license, and but for South Africa, like I mentioned, it's mostly ESCOM and of course the municipalities and distribution level. So this is Kenya, and again, just like most other countries, you have the generation, you have distribution, you have transmission, and then we have the key legislation, which is the Energy and Regulatory Petroleum Authority, Energy and Regulatory Petroleum Authority. That's the key regulator, apologies, for Kenya. And of course, we know Kenya has a large quantity of, it generates most of its energy from geothermal, right? So it's important to again bear this in mind. Geothermal, hydro, and depending on your country, to find out who your regulator is, you need to be familiar with your regulator, keep up to date with their guidelines. For instance, in Nigeria, we have guidelines and directives coming from the regulator on a daily basis, or well, let me just say daily, but very frequently. So you need to be sure, you need to follow the trend. Even if you're not following directly, have someone who is conversant with that keeps you abreast. Because why this is important is because one act may be permissible today, you might do something that is permissible today, tomorrow it might not. So you need to keep up to date with the trends within the energy space from the legal perspective, of course. All right, so we have the key regulations to look out for if you're in Kenya. You need to look out for your Energy Electricity Licensing Regulation 2012. You need to look at your Climate Change Act. Yes, I forgot to mention that for Nigeria. We also have a Climate Change Act and a couple of requirements there. So you need to pay attention to that. Although there are a couple of things that's required for the Nigerian one to get activated, but for Kenya, this has been on since 2016. So you need to pay attention to that act and find out if there are any obligations that are required for you as an energy developer within the country. Then, of course, there's environmental related law that requires compliance with getting some approvals if you're undertaking an energy project. So it's important to pay attention to this. If you're in Kenya, again, I'm just talking about different entities that operate the different aspects of the energy value chain. Okay, I think I want to move quickly because of our time to key project document. This is where I want to dwell on a little further. So I know as you're ideating at this stage, a couple of things you are thinking about, how to put together, how do I get my project off the ground, how do I get started? One of the key things you need to look at, particularly from the legal perspective, is your key project document. Okay, as an energy developer, and well, the project documents are focused on here are mostly project documents that relate to renewable energy development. So your wind, your solar, your hydro related projects and the likes. But the project document might differ depending on what you want to do. If you want to do an EV, well, maybe you may have an EPC, but you might not have like a PPA. Okay, you may have like an SLA with your company, with the entity you're doing, and you are putting together the EV for. So this vary, but I'll try to speak as much as I can very broadly, so that you understand what to look out for, even if you are not doing a renewable energy project. Okay, so one of the very important project documents is your EPC contract. EPC meaning engineering, procurement, and construction contract. And this is usually the contract that deals with the construction of your plant, your solar plant, or the manufacturing of your solar home systems, or the manufacturing of whatever it is you're trying to manufacture or produce. You need to have these contracts very well drafted, and in order to cover all the key areas. So first, you need to have someone who is qualified that can do that. You need to have, you need to decide whether your contract will be a fixed fee contract or one that is subject to variables. So let me explain what that means. So a fixed fee contract is one that you say, okay, I'm engaging you to do this for me. I'm paying you 10 million pounds, and that's all. You're not permitted to come back to me to ask for any additional sum. All right. Or you have one that is subject to variables, where the person at the end of the person does a particular aspect of the work, brings you an invoice, you pay, and then begins the next phase. So the amount of the contract is not fixed. It's just subject to different things that may be agreed at different stages of the project. So you need to decide what kind of contract you want to have. You also need to key things you also need to consider here is time for completion. When do you want the contract to be completed, or the manufacturing, the production to be completed? You need to decide that very clearly in the agreement. You need to decide, are there damages or damages or some form of penalties for failing to complete within the time? Are there provision for warranties? So your EPC contract should have warranties, so that in the event that the project is completed and there are still there are damages or things are not functioning well, you can enjoy warranties as well. You also have retentions. Retention meaning I wouldn't pay your entire money until after 12 months or 6 months when I check that the plant is working properly. So you need to pay attention to this for your contracting. Then you also, I can't build EPC contracts can range from 10 to 80 to 100 and 200, 300 pages. I can't possibly talk about all of that now. But you can do well to engage a lot, because this is what I do for a living here. So I get to negotiate a lot of these contracts. So, but you need to have, and interesting, I've also been able to negotiate contracts both in Nigeria and outside Nigeria as well. But what I would say is, as a developer within this space, ensure that you have well-drafted agreements. There are no friendships when it comes to projects. So it doesn't matter the person is your friend or a relative, is the more reason why you should have an agreement that spells out. And as much as possible, ensure that your agreements are very well detailed and cover the key aspects, so that you don't leave anything hanging. You don't leave anything hanging to deliberations between the parties outside the agreement. So a very important document is your PPA, right? This is your revenue generating document that enables you to sell power to your consumer. I will talk about this a little more in detail, because this is very important. You need to have your PPA structured in such a way that guarantees you an income. And that agreement is very important, this connection agreement. And this is very important if you're connecting to a grid, or you want to use a network belonging to another entity to, send power to your customer. So you may have a solar plant somewhere that is not close to your client. So you will then need to get a connection agreement to an existing distribution company to use their network to wheel your power generated to your consumer. So you need to have connection agreements. How would that be done? At what point of the day should the grid be made available to you? And what are the charges that you need to pay to the network owner? These are the kind of agreements you should have. Okay, they need to have your O&M agreements, meaning operational maintenance. Is particularly if, as a company starting off, you do not have, for instance, probably you don't have the skill to undertake the O&M. And also, this is also is an aspect that you can decide to take up as a business. I manage, I operate and maintain. I have a client that does that. All they do, they don't own any plants. All they do is that they operate and maintain existing plants for their clients. So this is also a business opportunity to think about. But then again, whichever way, it's important to have an O&M contract that details on the KPIs for maintenance. What are the agreed scheduled maintenance, unscheduled maintenance during emergency, how are spare parts handled? You need to be very detailed to cover all of this, so that, again, you don't leave anything to chance. And you also ensure that, because the more detailed and comprehensive agreements you have, the more incentivized the other party is to comply with the provision. But when you leave everything open-ended, it means that parties can decide what they want to do at their discretion. I'm sure you don't want to have that. Okay, so you also then have your procurement contract. So depending on your contract, you might not need someone to construct for you. Let's say, assuming you're just doing, you just want to set up, you just want to construct, you just want to get purchase a clean cooking stove business, or you want to just buy solar home systems. That might just be a procurement contract where you just need to agree on the key features of whatever it is you want to buy. It has to be clear: when should it get to me? How many days for delivery? How much do I pay? What are my rights? When can I raise? When I have a complaint for a particular equipment or a particular product, when do I raise a complaint? How will the complaint be addressed? These are a couple of things you need to bear in mind. Okay, so our time is fast spent, but I'm almost rounding up. So I think this is like the last slide. Yes, if I'm not mistaken. So what I want to do with this slide is to discuss with us a few things you need to pay attention to in your PPA. And why I chose PPA is because, I want to believe some of us are within the renewable energy space and intend to sell power to people either connected to the grid or off-grid, or maybe we are looking to structure it as an energy as a service, right? So there are a few terms that you need to pay attention to. First is your contract price and tariff. How is your tariff structured? So there are different mechanisms you can adopt. So you have energy payment where the person just pays for the energy consumed. Of course, you're going to have a meter, right? But for only for the energy consumed, the person pays for. Now, then the risk associated with just energy payments is that in the event that the customer decides not to utilize any energy at a particular time, it means that you might be running at a loss because the customer is not paying. Right. So, but there are payment structures that allows you for energy payments and capacity payments. So capacity payment is a payment that is available to you just by reason of the fact that you have built that plant for that customer. And this is very important where the solar plant has just been designed for that single customer alone, meaning that you don't have a choice to sell to any other person. In that instance, usually there should be a capacity payment that is mandatory, whether or not the consumer uses that electricity or not. So, and that just gives you some level of guaranteed income as a developer and to pay your lenders, if any, and to keep your project running. There's also the take or pay option, take or pay, take and pay. What that means is that there's a certain, even though your customer is meant to pay for just the energy they consume, right? But there's a certain threshold, probably I can say you must consume, there's a certain threshold that they are mandated to pay for, whether or not they consume it. So let's assume I have a 1 megawatt plant. I can say the payment for, say, 200 kilowatt out of that 1 megawatt, right, is a mandatory obligation. You have to pay for it. Anything above 2 megawatt, sorry, anything above 200 kilowatts, you can pay based on usage. But for 200 kilowatts, you must always pay for 200 kilowatts at the minimum. And that just, again, gives you guaranteed income. So then we talk about description of the facility. You need to describe the kind of plant you're building so there's clarity. You need to make a decision on the duration of your agreement. Again, the duration should mirror the term of your financing. So you don't want to have a loan obligation of 10 years and then you have a PPA of 5 years. That means that after 5 years, you begin to scout around for how to get money to pay your lender. So for the most part, and most preferably, you should have your PPA even extend longer than your debt financing, so that long after you have finished paying, you still have your PPA running as well. So it's important to pay attention to your term of your contract. Then it's also important to also look at just a second. Contracted capacity. How much are you looking to, what's the capacity you're looking to sell to you need to agree on that so that it also determines what size of power plant you need to build and what the expectation is. So you need to have metering. Metering is always very important because that's where you usually have problems. You need to have a metering arrangement in your PPA that allows you to, usually there will be a buyer meter and a seller meter that will just help parties understand how much of electricity is consumed and how much is due. You need to be aware of your commercial operations dates, because as much as you have the duty to construct the plant, the solar plant, you need to have the date that you need to agree on a date that the plant comes to life, sort of, right? Then you also need to talk about events of default. What are the things that if they happen, you are entitled to terminate the contract, okay? And you need to think about it very widely, so that you capture everything possible. Usually what you will have is when there's non-payment by the buyer, when there's probably a force majeure, meaning something that happens that's beyond the control of parties, or where parties on their own just decide, okay, we're done, we just want to go our separate ways, or when there is a payment that is due. I think I talked about payments already, or if there are certain obligations. Let's say, for instance, a certain aspect of maintenance. Let's assume you're doing energy as a service with your solar plant, and then you require that your client maintains the pan, they maintain some of the systems of, ensure. Okay, let me give an instance. The client is required not to overload the system so that it doesn't damage the inverter, and then the client does that. That may not necessarily be a payment issue, but it's a breach of the terms of the PPI. In that instance, you should have a right to terminate after giving requisite notices. So these are the things you should think about. every agreement should have a way out. It means it must have a termination arrangement. That's such that when parties are not no longer, in good terms and they need to go their separate ways, they are happy to do that. And every outstanding obligation is paid before parties go out, decide to go on from there. So there are a couple of other things that we can discuss, but in summary, sort of before we get into question and answers, key take-home points for everyone. Whatever business you're trying to ideate within the sustainable energy space, a starting point should be to look out for the laws, applicable laws, and find out what do I need to do to set up the business. In fact, some countries that in Nigeria, for instance, in Nigeria, some entities are actually established to approve equipment. So if I'm going to bring in a solar panel, inverter or whatever it is, you might need to have it inspected and approved by certain entities. So you need to know, right? There are also certain entities, some countries that might have requirement for the qualification of anybody that wants to play in a particular space. So they may say, if you want to be an engineer within a solar energy, you need to have so and so kind of certification or qualification. So you can't afford to ignore the law. All right. So pay attention to the law to find out first, what are the approval requirements that I need to get to do this project? 2, are there exemptions that I can enjoy? 3, are there obligations I need to fulfill outside my main sector? So like you might be doing a solar plant, so you need to find out, do I need to get any water permits? Do I need to get any building plan? Right? Then you also need to check out if there are any qualifications that may be required for you as a person, as a pioneer, or as a person running that business, so that you can either acquire that certification or get someone into your team that has that qualification. I can't remember, there's this business that I think it has to do with security. This is just to give an instance. So for you to register a business that's involved in security in Nigeria, you need to have someone that has certain degree or qualification as a security personnel. So it means that you need to pay attention to this. That is one. Secondly, you need to pay attention to the incentives that's available, because most incentives are provided in laws or regulations. So that you are not, missing out on any opportunity that you would have. Okay, pay attention to laws that has to do with interest rates. Well, this might not even be laws, there may be institutions in your country that provide funding at very concessional interest rates. So you need to pay attention to that. And then most importantly, you need to look at your contracts and documents that you need to enter into at the point of setting up. Ensure that they are well negotiated. Ensure that they are drafted by a qualified person. I've seen a lot of developers in a bid to save money will say, okay, I think it's not just an agreement. I can just couple of a lot of things together. But when they now eventually have problems, they now begin to look for a lawyer. Don't be that kind of developer. I know it might be expensive, but as much as possible, look for a lawyer that can fit within your budget, that can provide you the requisite advice you need to have a contract that is well negotiated within for the purpose of your project. So I will stop here and I will let you take it up from here, Maya, while I respect to questions. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chile, this has really been an amazing section. Of course, I read from the chat where someone was saying that he felt like he was in, a law class. Yes, and really, you have taken the section. This is more like a master class that people pay several thousands of dollars to have. They have given to participants this morning. So thank you so much, Madam Chineye. We really appreciate you for everything that you're doing for our participants on the Sustainable Energy Accelerator program. And yes, we have been nourished by your wealth of knowledge and your experience. And definitely, I am sure, we have questions in the chats already for you. So I will just, take the questions, although because of time, we will not be able to take so much questions. Yeah. And yeah, I understand also that participants really would want to display their appreciation. They want to show how much the value, the resources, and your time with us on this section. However, I want that to still be on hold, so I'll be able to steal the questions because their chat can override the questions. So after the questions, I'm sure everyone will be able to show their appreciation to you. So I'll be reading the first question now. And the first question that I want to read is that, yeah, the first one I will take here is from Felix. Felix said, as an energy consumer, is there permits and license to acquire to use them? And secondly, as energy distributor, is there waiver and benefit from the government as an encouragement to entrepreneurs? Madam Chinaya?
Okay. Yeah, I was saying that. So for consumers, well, like I said, everything depends on the law. So let me use Nigeria, for instance. Generally, consumers do not have any form of approvals required for you to use energy. Okay, but if you are then tending towards a particular threshold, then you will need, for instance, if you're a consumer that wants to use that you want to set up a power plant above 1 megawatt for yourself as a consumer, then you need to get a permit, a captive permit, okay, because of the size. But anything below that, you don't need a permit. And then another instance, again, I'll give is what we call eligible customers. So if you are if your consumer is not even an individual, maybe like a big industry that is looking to, that consume high, bulk of, a huge bulk of energy, that is looking to probably go off from the national grid and then buy directly from a producer, that consumer has to apply for eligible customer approval. So I would say, again, it all depends on the law within your state. So I just give an instance of Nigeria, for instance. So generally, you don't need an approval to be a consumer, okay? But then when you begin to tend towards a particular threshold, like I said, 1 megawatt, then you need to get approval. And then you say, are there incentives for... Okay, I think I talked about a couple of incentives, right? You just need to find out where your sits. So for I think you said it's a trading, someone wants to trade. Did you call that trading?
Yeah, well, the person is looking at, okay, we can have them as trainings, or maybe, but I think more importantly to this questionnaire, maybe the person wants something like maybe seed funding and all of that.
Well, seed funding, is not a government. Government, they typically not provide seed funding. Even if they want to do is grants they will give, right? Well, and then what I will also say is, when it comes to funding, particularly for Nigeria, I don't know how that works with other countries now, but what I would say, most of the funding opportunities you will find are maybe through BOI, government banks. Okay, so you can actually get funding from them, but it's not a grant, so it's a concessional interest rate. I think it's a single digit. The last time I checked, it was about 9%, right? So you need to, there are a couple of agencies that provide, there's REA, I forgot to talk about that, REA, yes. Rural Electrification Agency, they provide grants too. Yes, please, you can check that out if you are in Nigeria, right? They provide grants, a couple of, for different aspects of renewable energy, mini grids, and solar home systems and productive use systems. But before you have to go through the registration process, and then usually their grants are structured as result-based grants. When I mean result-based grants, in that you're not giving the grant upfront. You must have done the work and show proof, and then they pay you. Okay, so that's how it works, and that's just to ensure that people don't just collect the money and run off. So there are a couple of those. I think you can go check our Rural Electrification Agency website.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chineye. Yeah, Gerald from Kenya is also asking that what are the biggest legal and regulatory challenges facing the energy sector in the next decade?
Well, in terms of the energy sector, there are different ways to look at it. You can think about it as, in terms of unbundling the market, ensuring competition, and certainty. And then you also look at the aspect of, introducing renewable energy into the scheme of things. Now, one of the greatest challenges you will find is developing a viable energy sector that can stand on its own. What we have in Nigeria currently is that we have a electricity sector that is almost financed or funded by the government, because the distribution companies are not usually, and at this point, are not generating the full cost of the electricity that they produce, and it makes it difficult for them to sustain their businesses. So I believe that the one of the biggest issues that may come up in the coming years, and which we should begin to look out for, is how to build an energy sector that is independent, right? That can function as its own as a full-fledged market without government interference or support. When I mean interference, I mean the government doesn't have to inject money every now and then, but the market can stand on its own and run on its own. And secondly, a market that integrates renewable energy.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I align my thoughts too with your submission now, because when the market is independent, there may not be the need to look out for, when next can we execute this next plan phase, and when next can we do this and all of that. Definitely, the market itself will be able to resolve several issues that may arise from supplies and demands. Yeah, another question is here, and this is from Leonard. Leonard is asking that in the case of company certification, is it necessary to register a company name before commencement or starting before registering?
It's always good to register before you start. Because as you begin to, again, like I said, just imagine you already started, you are beginning to speak to people, and you are telling them, okay, this is the proposed name of my company. They are familiar with that name. You've spoken to like 10 potential investors or partners. And then lo and behold, by the time you're about to register the company, the name is no longer available or in use. How do you go back to tell them, I'm sorry, that's not my name anymore. It's not this name. So it's really not tidy. Once you have you have made a decision to set up a business, right? The first thing to do is to get the company registered, and ensure that the name is secure. So you don't have a situation where you then have to go back and forth on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And another question is here, is asking that is there a need for registration in terms of buying, selling, and installation of solar energy? And another one that would seem like it that I think I want you to answer together is, Simeon from Namibia is interested in establishing a community project building a biogas system which can supply gas to about a village size. So he's asking what will be the necessary legal channels to follow. Maybe, the qualifications he needs to be able to do this and all of that.
Okay, I'm not from Namibia, but I'll give you some insights to help to guide you. So one of the things you need to look out for is, okay, but because for some countries, you might not find any law that talks about biogas or that talks about hydro specifically, or that talk about solar, right? But what you would find is electricity generation. Okay, so and once the purpose of your biogas is to generate electricity, then you need to look out for that law that relates to electricity regulation, and then find out how that is applicable to you, particularly with respect to thresholds. So you need to, what is the capacity of my biogas plant? And what is the capacity or what is the threshold for getting a permit? If the size of your plant, gets up to that threshold, then you need to get licensing. But if not, then you don't. So that is on one hand. Then you also need to look at the environmental issues as well. Are there environmental compliance, which I expect there should be, right? So you need to get that as well. Then you also need to look out for the requirement for setting up such kind of plant in a community, in a community in that area. Because, for instance, in Nigeria, if you're going to set up a mini grid in a community, one of the legal requirements is that you need to get into an agreement with the head of the community, or the community itself, more like agreeing to the terms of your project in terms of how you intend to execute the project within that community. So you might probably have something similar in Namibia. So you need to check out, is there any legal requirement to do that? And even if there is no legal requirement, it's always stakeholder engagement is extremely important in setting up community project or any project at all. So you need to then engage with the community, which I believe you should have been doing, so that engage with the community before executing that project. So look at your licensing requirement, look at environmental requirements, look at the community engagement, and of course, I'm sure your company is registered as well. And look at if there's any requirement to register the equipment or to verify or approve the equipment for the biogas plants as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ma. And there's a last question here. This person is asking that, is there any law preventing the conversion of flared gas into power?
No, there's no at all. As far as from my experience, there's no law preventing that. In fact, it's even encouraged. There is a gas we know for Nigeria, for instance, we have what we call the decade of gas, where there's the government is encouraging private sector to get into improving gas infrastructure to ensure that our gas reserves are very well optimized. So I'm not aware of anything like that. So it's a field that you can explore.
Yeah. So, Madam Chineye, truth be told, I am sure that everyone has gained much more beyond the expected value from today's section. And indeed, we have all been impacted by your expertise and year of experience on the subject of energy law and regulation. We say a very big thanks to you. And of course, we really appreciate your time and your commitment, and even finding that place within your busy schedule to be a part of us on this program this morning. And I think this is the part where the participants want to show their appreciation. I don't know how you're feeling or what you feel from the section, but if you really want to show your appreciation to our facilitator this morning, I think this is the part where you want to use your emojis, you want to write in the chat and express your appreciation for today's section. Of course, on behalf of the leadership of ADEF Africa, we appreciate you, Madam Chineye, for a great section like this. We know that you might still have some other engagements for the day, and we don't want to delay you with us any further, as we still have a few things to mention to the participants. So if you will, that you want to take your leave now, of course, we would not mind. And I must just say it again that we hope to see you some other time. And I'm definitely that when we knock on your door again for an opportunity to learn from your wealth of experience as this, we'll always find that place with you to be granted an access, just like today.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. So what I see a couple of other questions that came in. Well, what I would do is, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I get to do a lot of write-ups sometimes, and then maybe you could learn from that, or probably I can help answer your questions as much as I can. So thank you very much, everyone, for having me. Thank you for the very kind words. I truly appreciate that, and thank you for the ADEF team for having me. I would have to leave. Yes, so do have a nice day, everyone.
And you too, ma. Thank you very much. And yes, to everyone on the call right now, what does it feel like? What does it feel like? What does it feel like? I see already. Thank you for such an informative section. Yes. It has really been an informative one. In fact, this would guide a whole lot of us in knowing the approaches to carrying out our energy-related projects within different communities. And yeah, I want to believe that right about now, we've all received the evaluation form that has been shared in the chat. Two things will happen with the evaluation form. Firstly, the filling of that evaluation form will inform your progress in this program. You know, it gets to the phase wherein we will be progressing, and definitely we would always love to go along with everyone. But for those who would not have, had a preliminary knowledge of what we'll be doing in this project, starting from this workshop phase now, it will not be too good, when we get to the project phase and they seem uninformed of what to do. So definitely for such individuals that may be lagging behind in filling the TEF form, such may not be able to proceed beyond this phase of the project. So I encourage you that for each and every section, ensure that you fill in the TEF form. And what is another thing to do with the TEF form? We encourage you that at the end of each and every section as this, you go on you go on the social media and you write your reflections from today's lesson. You write it out there on the social media. What are we helping you to do with that? We are helping you to document your learning journey, because this will inform your own CV. When you continue to do this at each and every section now, someone who is unaware before that you're on your journey to becoming an energy expert, through such posts, they will know that you have taken learnings in the energy sector and careers within the renewable industry. So this, when you're starting to seek for opportunities, they can easily look back and see track records of your experience within the energy sector. So make sure that you make your posts, attach the link for the post in the TEF form, and you make sure to submit the TEF form at the maximum 12 hours after each section. So keep that in mind. And when you make the post, ensure to use the appropriate hashtags that have been defined for this program. And also, if you would like to tag us to your post, feel free to tag us to your posts. It also helps you to gain some visibility and maybe a bit of engagement also. Yes, I think that will be all for now. Permit me to also inform you that your next section will be the same time today by next Friday. So please keep in mind and make sure to fill your calendar for the same time. I am definite that it has really been a knowledgeable day for us so far. Thank you all for joining this call. Do not forget to carry out the task accordingly. And of course, we are hoping that we'll see you again the same time next week. But then, keep learning and live sustainably. On behalf of VDF Africa, we say bye for now and do enjoy the rest of your day. All right, bye everyone, and see you again next class.